was the chairman at the time, and he was approached by the developers who developed the property around here with a proposition that they would like to buy the 10 acres up here in exchange for 10 acres and a building down below. I think there's $1 million property built down there now. In any event, Steve and the rest of us on the board felt compelled, particularly in view of the economic conditions, to at least present this to the congregation. As it developed, the transfer and the congregational meeting at the time occurred just the transfer of responsibility from Steve Leo to me. And he happily handed this hot potato to me. I think many of you recall the meeting we had. I am still pulling the nails out of my hands and feet from that experience. The opportunity that we were given that we couldn't refuse was overwhelmingly defeated. Well, now, as Jim Sutherland well recalls, he was the vice chairman at the time, we were still deeply in debt and seeking some solution. We did contact Boston at the time for their guidance, despite the fact that some of the members, because of their previous experience with Boston, considered them the enemy. Nevertheless, we did get guidance to refinance. At the time, the mortgage with Thorpe was $80,000. Well, Alan Bly, many of you remember Captain Bly, now deceased, was the treasurer at the time, and he and I think we were thrown out about a dozen banks who said thanks but no thanks. They wouldn't give us a mortgage until one in Annandale did for $150,000. Well, that was our salvation at the time. We got the $150,000. $30,000 went quickly down into the sewer. Up to that time, we were on the septic system. And some of our neighbors weren't too enthused about the consequence of that and forced us to hook up to the sewer system, for which we spent the $30,000. In any event, we did pull through that crisis and survived to meet other crises. I would like to perhaps a moment of personal privilege, because Annette suggested I do this. A couple of months ago, I was surprised and very pleased and impressed to see many of you surprise me on my 80th birthday, which was held at Pat Jackson's house. As I looked around and saw you, the meaning of the church really came to me, because here were people with whom I shared a strong mutual respect and deep affection. The church has meant a great to me. Thank you.
I'm number 6. And I know Al is a pretty tough act to follow.
However, I want to tell you one of my earliest memories of this church, and that was the bringing my children over to go to Sunday school. And one was 6, and the other was 8. And Eleanor was an instigator, and my name's John Bodkin, incidentally. And she was the one that really twisted my arm to become a member. So what happened was that one day my little boy, John, he wanted to go fishing. And I was looking all over for a fishing rod for him. And there was a bamboo copse down in the back of the little, remember that building down there where we first started? That was the, what do they call it? The stables or the guest house. Anyway, we cut a bamboo rod there, and then he and I went over to the Potomac River, and he caught a catfish. Then time elapsed. I don't remember any of the early activities that everybody's been told, but I do remember something that's recent, and that was that last Tuesday, it was my birthday, and I was 90. And Elaine had a companion group that meets every Tuesday, and I was invited. And there I was, standing at the end of the table in this very, very comfortable chair, or sitting in the chair, and this huge cake was brought with John, with love for all, at 90th birthday. So I'm very appreciative to Elaine Ronez for her activities and urging the group to get together and celebrate my birthday. Then on Thursday, the girls got together and did the same thing again and gave me a beautiful, beautiful bouquet of flowers and another cake. So our refrigerator is well stocked. Coincidentally, next April 20th, that little 7-year-old boy that caught the catfish is going to be in this church. And his name will be Odds Bodkin, as far as. And we hope everybody here will be available to see his show, because it's quite good, really. And I think that's about all I have to say.
I'm Dottie Ann McClelland, and I live in the kitchen here. And I have since I first came in 1961, starting with bake sales, and then the food for the core workshop that we had here, and I'm still here. So I have a different view of the church. I have the kitchen door view. And from that aspect, I want to tell you about John Wells' ordination. This was a very big event up here. We had invited hundreds of people. We had even arranged to rent a very expensive organ. This affair was going to be held in the Boxwood Gardens. And many people were coming. It was our first ordination. It was an affair. We came up in the morning. We borrowed everyone's in the congregation's white damask tablecloths. We didn't own any at the church at that time. We set up tables. It was a beautiful morning. We set up tables out under the trees on the other side of the mansion, and with the tablecloths all out. And we put out the punch bowls. And we put out all the punch cups all ready, and we had arranged for people to bring donations of food. Then we went home. This affair was to take place at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Then we went home for lunch. Then something happened in the weather. It rained. It rained so hard and so suddenly. It was a downpour. And so I rushed back up here, and there were all of our white damask tablecloths, all totally sodden. There were the punch bowls, all filled up with rain. Ditto the punch cups, because we hadn't learned, as John Stevens taught us later, that you turn the punch cups over so that they're clean. And so we rushed inside, and then some other group had to immediately rush this very expensive organ out of the garden into the chapel. And all those people who were getting ready to fill the garden had to find spaces in the chapel, which wasn't really very large. In the meantime, the kitchen crew, we were all up there in the mansion where the reception was going to be held, wringing out the tablecloths and pushing them just as flat as we could over the tables so that they looked sort of respectable, and emptying out the punch bowl and the punch cups and arranging things. There were a lot of people who couldn't get into the chapel, so they all came up. We had many, many helpers, you know. Well, we couldn't get into the chapel. Could you use us up here? And that was the beginning of John's reign as the rain god. Whenever he was in charge of an outdoor event, it would rain. This was a little hard on the brides who got married in the garden. I remember one in particular. It didn't really rain, but he got to the point, this was a fairly conventional service. He got to the point where he said, does anyone in the congregation know why this pair should not be joined in wedlock? And a tremendous thunderclap sprang out, as if to say, God knows.
Found number 8, but are you next? Okay. 9.
Chuck Dell again. Just wanted to make the record complete a little more. Well, I forgot to mention about the greenhouse. And, you know, this was, Mrs. Thorpe used this greenhouse. John Stevens operated it. But when we came up here, we didn't know what to do. But George Bricklemeyer, this big tall fellow who sang bass in the choir, didn't he sing bass also, with Buck? He thought that he would just go to work on it, and he did. It was just tremendous. I guess about 10 or 15 years, he ran the greenhouse there in great quantities of wonderful impatiens, and this was just great stuff. Another thing, John, and another guy, George Bricklemeyer.
We're still looking for the holder of card number 9. Do you have anything you'd like to share?
I'm Al Searle, charter member, been around a while here. In case you're wondering what these pants are for, they're very old, although they don't look that old. They're have mythological figures on them, which I thought I'd wear tonight to celebrate the fact that I've been teaching mythology courses here almost as long as when the church started, at least when the Bumbaws arrived. A riddle occurred to me. Why is the Mount Vernon Unitarian Church like the federal government? You'll never guess. They both have budget problems, which they never seem to solve, but they both keep going on. Someday archaeologists will have fun here, or they'll be puzzled. They'll dig out the swimming pool and wonder what kind of baptismal ritual we've had on refrigerators. They'll also dig out in the parking lot and find an old heating element of a oil tank and wonder why we would put such a thing under a parking lot. Of course, those who know that that was the remains in the basement of a building that used to be there, which we called the junior house. And it's right out a few feet from the front door underneath the ground. But seriously, more seriously than that, they'll find on the hill some skeletons, a graveyard of colonial soldiers we have in the church custody somewhere, the tombstones of these colonial.
They're in the basement of Mountain Hall.
Thank you. These were here when we moved in. They were on the ground, actually, at the gravesites, and they've now been kept by the church. That land is no longer part of our property, but we keep these as remembrances. And I think we never were able to get a historical society to look into that. Does somebody want to have any information on that? My understanding.
The society has looked into it. There's been no report issued yet, but we are in the annals there somewhere.
One story I got was that we invited some people here to look at it, and they weren't interested when they found out that they were not officers but were buck privates. So I don't know whether it's kind of colonial snobbery or not. The statement that we all joined the church because we wanted to have some religious instruction for the children may be partly true, but then why are we still here? We hung around anyway, see. So I suspect that we really wanted to get together, and that it was the kids were part of it, but not all of it. And for me, that's certainly true. And I've valued all of the time I've been here. Haven't always been happy about everything that went on, but then most of the time things have been very rewarding, and I'm sure glad I stuck around. Thank you.
Jay and I, what?
Who are you?
Oh, I'm B. Holmes. And that's my husband, Jay. And we joined the Unitarian Church in Albany in about, what, 19...
The same time the church was formed. The same time this church was formed, we joined in Albany.
55, yes. And we moved to Holland Hills in part because it was near a Unitarian church. And the first time we went to church, we heard a very moving sermon by Ernest Summerfield and signed the membership book right away, which is not to say that we were that active to begin with. Jay, who was always a good citizen, was active. He had sung in the choir in Albany and in Hollis, New York, so he joined Bruce Netchard's choir, and he was fired by Bruce twice and taken back because he had to take business trips and couldn't attend rehearsals. Bruce ran a very tight ship. Jay also taught a 9th grade course in Great Men. That's what it was called, although he took the course at the end of one year to Arena Stage, and I tagged along and brought my son John, who was in the 9th grade but wouldn't be in his father's class, to see Joan of Arc by Bernard Shaw. So men were interpreted to mean women.